Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Lindsay Sisters podcast. Tonight, we are going to be doing another episode of the Real Black Talk segment. Let me just explain what that is. We came up with this segment to do where we kind of hit on heavier topics that we go more in depth to and kind of stem a little longer than our normal videos. So, on tonight's episode, part one, we are going to talk about mental health stigmas and just mental health issues that kind of plague the Black community. So we're going to start tonight with Ron. Do you want to kind of give us the definition of what mental health is?
All right. Good evening, everyone. The definition of mental health per Oxford's definition is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. The World Health Organization defines it as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. There's an example of it from mentalhealth.gov, and it says mental health includes, it asks what does mental health include? And it says it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress related to others and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. And finally, 5 warning signs of mental illness. One is long-lasting sadness or irritability, extremely high or low moods, excessive fear, worry, or anxiety, social withdrawal, and dramatic changes in your eating or sleeping habits. And the last thing is, the question was, why is mental health important? And this was from medlineplus.gov. It affects how we think, feel, and act as we cope with life. It also helps determine how we handle stress related to others and make choices. Mental health is it's important at every stage. And as the other one said as well, through adolescence and adulthood. That's the definitions of mental health. For me, I feel like mental health is a stigma in the Black community because a lot of people, I'm going to speak from my experience. If you go and say that you're depressed, like I remember I was battling deep depression at one point in my life, and I went to someone and they said, well, I don't understand what you're depressed about. You have a good job, you have a place to stay, you have a nice car, you have nice clothes, your children are healthy. And that's the scary part about depression, which is a mental illness. And everything in life can seemingly be right on the outside, but it's all the battles that an individual is having on the inside is where the problem comes in. But I feel like in the Black community, I remember for me, I was told if we went to a therapist that you were crazy. They thought you were crazy, something was wrong with you. And I remember going to therapy for like 6 months and not really working the program. And then one night I went and I'm like, I'm tired. I mean, I started coming, and my therapist, they told me, like, we're never going to get anywhere. We're never going to cover any ground unless you open up and work the program. And so when I finally started to work it, and I'm crying and tears are flowing, and we started to have a breakthrough that night. And I realized I was dealing with something that happened to me when I was 6 years old. And I had never shared with any family members that it happened, didn't share it with my parents, didn't share it with anybody. And it was bothering me. It was affecting my relationships, my intimate relationships, like with significant others, and then also some of my friendships and some of my jobs and my relationships, professionally. So I feel like it's a stigma, and a lot of us have a hard time expressing ourselves, and especially Black men. Like I've seen videos on TikTok and other places, and I know Jazz had mentioned that as well, where they talk about a lot of Black men don't share their feelings. And we don't, because we don't, it's a lot of times it's hard, and I'm speaking from experience, it's hard to feel safe in a relationship to do so. And that's with the significant other, that's with sometimes your siblings, sometimes your parents. Um, because we didn't grow up hearing, and I remember talking to an elder cousin about this a few years ago. They didn't grow up hearing the I love yous. They didn't say it. I say it to my children. I remind my children every day, multiple times a day, that I love them. I try to send them encouraging text messages in the morning to help with their mental health, to remind them that they are fearfully, beautifully, and wonderfully made, that they are beautiful. So they don't have to look for somebody to tell them in the streets that they are intelligent. So if somebody calls them dumb, they know that that's not true. You know what I mean? So I try to do different things to help my children and change the narrative and control the narrative in the Black household, Black community. But that's what I have. Back to you, IKEA.
Okay.
Jazz.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I did some research and I found that 13.4% of the population is Black. Over 16% reported having a mental illness within the past year. If you break that down, that's roughly about 7 million people. And if you break it down a little bit further, that's more than Chicago, Houston, and Philly's populations combined that have reported having some type of mental illness within the last year or so. That's alarming. That is very, very, very alarming. I think that with mental health, you can go so many different ways with this. But I think that the reason why the Black community in particular doesn't decide to get help, even if they know they need it, is because that we were taught it's a sign of weakness. And when asked this question, 63% of Black people said mental illness is considered a weakness. So why would I go get help? I'm not weak. A lot of people I don't think understand how mental illness can really affect you. Um, a lot of times we have what's called psychosomatic illnesses, a constant headache, a constant backache, my foot hurts, my knee won't stop aching, all type of stuff. And a lot of that comes from mental illnesses like anxiety, depression, and others. And it's that pent up energy that we have within that we haven't released that's bothering us, and it's become a physical thing now on top of a mental thing. Speaking on what Ron said, for a lot of us, our mental health issues stem from childhood trauma. And a lot of us don't realize that molestation, that rape, that not being shown any type of affection, so on and so forth, that we dealt with as children has manifested itself within the body as physical ailments, stress, triggers, and all type of other things that we don't necessarily realize. Um, I'm not sure how people feel about the Church of Scientology and auditing, but if you have a Church of Scientology in your area and you can audit, I would suggest doing so. I've done it. It does help with dealing with those type of things. Um, with depression, it could be linked to all type of chronic illnesses like diabetes, cancer, asthma, arthritis, stuff like that. So you might be sitting somewhere dealing with something like diabetes and arthritis, which could be linked to depression, and you not even know it. And dealing with that might help you be able to get rid of those chronic illnesses. I did go ahead and come up with some resources. So, I mean, if you're suffering from mental illness, think you're suffering from mental illness, need somebody to talk to, you can look up the Black Emotional and Mental Health. It's called BEAM. You can Google that. You can Google the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation. There's Therapy for Black Girls, the Loveland Foundation, Therapy for Black Men, and there's Dr. Ebony's My Therapy Cards, Safe Black Space, There's life coaching if you're into all of that. And then another thing to remember is we don't necessarily wrestle with the flesh. It is a constant fight every day for your life and for your mental health. You have to fight. You can't give up on it. I've dealt with mental health on myself. My issue was panic attacks and anxiety. It got so bad that I couldn't go outside. I couldn't drive. Thunderstorms scared me. And then it got to a place where when I lived in a state where places had basements, I wouldn't come upstairs. It gets bad and it's okay to talk about it. And one more resource I forgot, it's on Instagram. It's a page called Express Yourself Black Man. And I haven't been through the entire page, but from what I have seen, it's pretty dope. You should check it out.
Carlos.
Um, great information by Ron and Jazz. Definitely helpful. Um, I would like to say, for as when um, just touching on the mental health, I did a brief like research, but it's pretty much the same areas you all were covering, for as just depression and mental illness, bipolar disorder, um, anger, um, um, health conditions, self-esteem issues, anxiety attacks, drug issues, drug issues as well, drug disorders. It's just a psychosis, schizoaffective affective disorder. So it's just different ones. Um, and I can honestly say that, I can say that me growing up as a child, I experienced, I would say more like a physical abuse, being pulled in closets and, nose being pulled and told that I would never be, uh, you know, amount up to anything or whatnot as a child by my stepfather. Uh, and that stuff, that imputed anger in me. And when the anger, it shut me down where I didn't want to share, with anyone my issues, because I felt like this should have never happened. I didn't understand what was happening. So it was like, I dealt with it the other way, like by fighting. I fought a lot in school, um, played football, took it out that way sometime, but definitely fought, had a real bad temper. And so it would come out that way, you know, I just didn't have understanding, like just being able to discuss or to know why I was feeling that way, why these things were taking place, why I was responding. So I ended up receiving. I got into a situation in 2003, I think, and definitely, got arrested for it, whatnot. Uh, Counseling, anger management was one of my sources out to help me to rehabilitate. And so once I did that, by getting that therapy, it helped me to know how to utilize my anger and to be able to speak what I feel instead of demonstrating it physically. So when people would, knowing the difference with people who love me that will trigger me and those who didn't love me, people that love me that wouldn't do things to trigger my anger, and opposed to those who didn't love me and would do things to push my buttons. So when I mastered that part, I was able to adjust and to deal with my anger way better than allowing my anger just to, overflow and I do things without thinking. So it's definitely a problem in the black community. It's definitely a problem with black men. And a lot of times they don't speak up because, of course, like Ron and what Jasmine saying, like they it's a fear thing, a fear of how people gonna look at me, especially if they've been sexual abused. And I was looking at a podcast with I think it was Mike Tyson and Kevin Gates was on there, and they were expressing about them being sexually abused, how it turned them into basically an animal. They took that anger and they put it into something that they love, especially for Mike Tyson. That's why he said he fought so hard, because he said he would never let no one do him like that again. So it made him the most feared man in the ring. And so that still, even though he used that as a way to channel his anger, it still was a sign of abuse. It was still showing a sign of disorder because this issue was not dealt with, and the person that violated him uh, didn't get, that didn't get taken care of either. So this thing goes on, and you ask yourself, where is the healing process? Because I mean, Mike Tyson today, he still would beat you up real bad in the ring. So, and Kevin Gates, I'm not sure what he did. He said he took boxing up and all of that, but I assume from his music, he utilized it away. Well, he went to jail a lot. Let me just say that he was in and out of the prison system, so that did explain it. Most of your basically people who commit murder and stuff like that, you got to go like do a research on their background, and abuse is there. But what we do, we try to hide it, and especially when it's like sexual, like sexual abuse, being raped, whether if it's by a man or whatever. It's like now you trying to prove to the world that you ain't gay, or you tough. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna fight against this. I'm gonna put off this hard image, but I'm gonna take my anger out on everyone. So that's a case of a person that's not healed. They're still sick, and it's just a way that why men they deal with it, and that can very well drive them to depression. It's already so many odds against us as black men. So we taught to be tough. We're taught to not to cry. We're taught not to express ourselves. Take it like a man up. So we're not going to express ourselves about stuff like that because it comes off as weak and feminine. But I do agree that things it should be more paid attention to more with sons and young men that are growing up, whether from young boys and then young men, teenage years, adolescent years, all the way up to being young adults. Just monitoring them, and giving them an avenue to be able to speak, other than because females are always the one, like because they talk about the rape and stuff like that, that happened, but and then you tend to look over the males, like it was family members in my family, they were sexually molested. Some of the men, some men, by men, and that got looked over because the women were more zoomed in on. And again, we're taught to be strong, you know, don't cry, you're weak if you do. So, normally, the man, we as men, we will not express ourselves. And what happens to a person that's not healed? They go on to, and you raise children, and you still find yourself putting off that type of energy on them. And it causes some type of form of dysfunction, which spreads from generation to generation. So definitely, mental illness is something very, very seriously that should be taken very seriously on all levels. Um, especially with men now, because it's just a lot that goes up against us, and it keeps us from opening up. and it's kind of hard to reach people like that.
Yeah, definitely. Mental health is definitely something I think everybody as an individual and as a family, that's something that needs to be a topic that is expressed with every person in your household. And I think it starts at home so that you gain certain coping skills outside of the house. Because if you can't deal with your mental issues in the home, you definitely can't deal with them outside of the home. And so we're going to kind of talk about some of those in part 2. So just definitely click on part 2 of the video, because we will definitely get into what are some of those things that can be the reason why someone may not speak out if something was to happen to them and it affects their just overall well-being and interferes. So definitely stay tuned for that, because part 2 is now available. And we will see you in the next video.